the nice thing I think it's about my work is that it's all evolved very organically. And often we don't see the lesson or the blessing in something until much later. But I think there is always like a bigger plan. And am honestly, if you'd said to me all those years ago that I would be dedicating my life to working in this field of water, I would have been very surprised. So well over 20 years ago now, I was in a really horrendous car accident. The driver, it was just the driver and myself in the car. And we, es- the, the deeper story is that this man, he was really clever. He was really funny. He, had two children. He had just got divorced. He was going through a lot of things, and he was always had been very successful. And he also became quite clinically depressed. And I think really good people can also do really bad things sometimes. And I don't think that um, I think it's important to just kind of remember that sometimes. I had become like he essentially had really spent a lot of time with me. I worked for him for a while and we'd become really good friends. And at that time, I was on a very, very spiritual journey. I was also um, celibate for like four years. I had decided like this is going to be my journey. I want to really just pursue this this philosophy. I was really interested in Vedic philosophy. I was saving up for my very first trip to India. I had, I had a, as a young person, I was always very, very spiritually minded, but I wasn't taught any of that. So it was very natural for me. And so this was like a natural progression for me to just, go into this space and be very honest with people about it. So I was very honest with him in the beginning about where I was at and that I wasn't looking to be in a relationship. And he started to see me a little bit like a light at the end of his tunnel. When things
Mm.
go really, really bad, sometimes we try to clutch on to the nearest thing, and I think I became that for him. And unfortunately, towards the end of this this story, he really went in a bad direction. So the day before the car accident, I caught him following me, and I said to him, "Please, you know, don't do that. um, it's really not okay." Um, there's a very polite way of how that went down. He couldn't hear me at that point, and I had said to him, I was trying to tell him to just leave me alone.
Mm.
Um, and he, like I said, he couldn't hear it. I had said something I didn't mean. I really, I'd said, just leave it alone. It's the only time I've ever told somebody that I hate them. I feel guilty about that. The next day, he came over to the house, and for whatever reason, I didn't have a vehicle, so I was going to catch the bus to the city to pay for my ticket to India that I'd saved all my money for a year. And that was like when we had physical money and we went to go and see the physical like travel agent,
Yeah.
all of that. And he came to the house and he just apologized and he said, "Look, I was a complete dick. I'm so sorry. Can I at least take you to the city and take you?" Because he knew how important this was to me. And I said, "Look, I don't hate you. I'm glad I got to say that. I don't hate you, but I hate the situation you put me in. It was really unfair." And Prior to that, like about a week before that, he'd said he would kill himself if I didn't love him. So things had escalated pretty badly. And I just said, I hate the situation you've put me in. And he was very apologetic and he was very sincere. And you have to remember, I'd also spent a year getting to know this man. And like, I know people go through their own stuff. I'm always willing to accept an apology. So I got in the car with him, but he didn't take me into the city. Um, he kept going up north. And we stopped, and I said, "Where are you taking me?" And he didn't speak to me until we stopped. And at that point, I really should have tried to just get out of the car. Um, but I was like, okay, like, talk to me, what's going on? And I was thinking, should I just make a run for it at this point? And he said, look, you know, I, I, I want you to marry me. I want you to love me. I want this. I want this. I want the other thing. And I started to like open the car door, and like he reached over and he grabbed it and he pushed it and he said, "No, you can't leave." And then he started driving. And I'm freaking out at this point. And he realized, I think, that whatever I said was going to be me just trying to get out of the situation. So I went inward and I started thinking about going to India, what that's going to look like, how I'm going to, feel when I first get there. I started to try really, really hard to put myself in a different place than where I currently was. He and I didn't speak for about 30 minutes or so. But he'd turned the car back towards where I lived. So I'm like, at least we're going the right direction. And there was dead straight road in this area called Dairy Flats. And I had my seatbelt on and he didn't. And I looked up and I saw this big truck coming towards us. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a really big truck. I had no real reason to think that, but it was a thought. And then he turned and he looked at me and he said to me, if I can't have you, no one can. And he turned the car into the truck on purpose. We went underneath the truck, rolled twice. Uh, I was knocked out on impact, came around as soon as the car stopped rolling, but he was decapitated, immediately killed in this situation. And when I came to, I could see the car was also starting to spark. And with all the effort that I had, because my internal organs were crushed, my collarbone was shattered, I was completely covered in glass. Um, I was so grateful I couldn't see his body, because I'm so visual that I don't think I could ever, anyone could have ever unseen that. And I cried out for help. And the man who was driving behind us, he had a MiG fighter jet that he was showing around New Zealand, and he was driving back towards the showgrounds where that plane was. And he was in a fireproof outfit. And I know. And he heard me, he stopped obviously, and he heard me cry out for help. And he told me he thought no one could have survived. No one could have survived that. But he climbed over this man's body, undid the seatbelt, and I fell into his arms and he took me into the side of the road. And I remember seeing my face in his glasses, my reflection of just like white and blood everywhere. Interestingly, he said I wasn't even speaking in English when I kind of came around. And then one of the things that I said to him that I remember saying quite clearly, I said, "Do you mind if we talk about God for a minute?" And he was like, "Oh, it's okay. You're not going to die. You're not going to die." And I'm like, "No, not because I think I'm going to die, but because I know I'm going to live." And it wasn't coming from like a very, very religious perspective, but it just came from somewhere. And I went to the hospital and they spent a good 4 days, picking all the glass out of me, trying to stop the internal bleeding, and I literally looked like I'd been hit by a truck. And I didn't want his children to find out what had really happened, because I put myself in their shoes and I thought how hard that would be to hear about your dad. So although at the scene I had told the man who saved me and the fireman what had happened, so of course it's going to get out. But as I consciously kind of started to think about it and it started coming flooding through, I was thinking about them, and I don't know, I wanted to do something for them. I wanted to try to help the situation. I knew I couldn't like lie about it. It all came out in the end. Everything always does. But I wanted to soften it. And so I wanted to go to the funeral. And I remember the priest asking me not to come because there was an assumption that I would go and say all kinds of horrible things and I was going to be someone someone else. And I said, no, I'm going to come. I promise I'm not going to do anything crazy. And how I even got there, like, so in a wheelchair, like I was a mess. There was no white in my eyes whatsoever. Like I looked horrendous. Like everything was like I was a mess. But I remember being helped to like stand up and got up and I spoke. And his children were in the front, and his ex-wife and her partner were there. And it was hugely full. He was quite a well-known man. And I got up and I read this little card that he'd given me that came from like a very spiritual place. Because, like I said, good people can do really bad things sometimes. Um, it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't think his nature in any way was bad. I think he was desperate, desperate to find love in himself. And and it was just something very profound and personal that he'd written. And then on top of that, I just said from my heart, this is a good man. Unfortunately, things sometimes can be really hard for people in life. But I know that he really loved his children. And I looked at them when I said that, and I said, and he had so much love for them, and he had so much love for people, and he was such an amazing and talented man. And I stopped there because there was no need for me to go into anything about what actually happened. And then I left. I didn't think much more about it because I had to focus so much on my own healing, which actually went on for many years. I ended up having to have 3 bowel resections, and I've had 8 surgeries and all of this. But many years later, I went into the city, believe it or not. I don't drink or smoke or do drugs or any of these things. Like I've never been curious about that. It's been kind of not my thing. I turned vegetarian when I was 8 years old and told Mum I didn't want to eat meat and animals anymore. And I don't project any of that onto anyone else. This is just my thing, right? But I love dancing. And so I used to go out sometimes with my mum. Like what I used to do, right? My mum was so much fun. It was
Yeah, yeah.
my best
That's
friend.
so cool.
Yeah. And we went out and we were in the city. And this woman came running up to me. And before I could even realize it, she was like hugging me. And then I came and I looked at her and I realized exactly who it was. And it was this man's daughter who was so much more grown up. And she just hugged me and she said, thank you. I get emotional talking about it. Thank you so much for what you said at the funeral, because you you helped me to keep loving my dad just the way that I always did. And she told me about how now she would go and she would leave a little Snickers bar at the site where he died because he always loved Snickers bars. And that she could go there to this place where something so horrific happened and with love in her heart. And she said it changed her life that what I said and how I said it. And sometimes we overcome with sometimes the right thing to say when it just comes from your heart. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing like that. It has to be perfect, but it's always perfect when it comes from the heart. And I had made a decision, the fact that I survived that car accident, which if you see it, and it really is like impossible. You can't imagine how anyone could survive it. And that I had that a choice. Actually, it didn't even feel like I had to make a choice. I forgave him because the moment it happened, there's this part of me that when I feel into that, I know he regretted it. And I want to be a person that can forgive someone for something so awful because that has an effect, a knock-on effect for generations to come. It frees the family.
Mm.
And even though I might not have really known that, what I was doing at the time, the fact that I could breathe and I could walk, and that even though, yes, I had to have lots of surgeries and I had to go through some really painful things, it was so much easier to forgive him for what happened. And one of the things of why I don't actually talk, I very rarely actually tell this story, but you heard me talk. So when I talk in person, sometimes I share more personal stories. So I generally don't publicly talk about that because I do think it's quite a personal story. But one of the reasons that I share about forgiveness as being one of our absolute superpowers is because there was some work I was doing with water. This was many years ago. And I work in crystallography. It's just a fancy way of saying that I have a very special and simple freezing method. Um, and the stage of freezing that I'm working with is a more of a plasma. So it's not a solid and it's not a liquid. And and I can see incredible imagery in this work reflected through whatever the inspiration was prior to freezing. Anyway, we can get into that later or whatever you like. But this one man, he had reached out and he had asked me, can you trick the water? Can you deceive it? And I just thought, what a strange thing to ask me. I said, well, I became suspicious. I was like, why would you ask me this? And I said, what is a lie detector test? Really, it's just like there is no hiding from it. You are, by molecular count, not by volume, 99% water. Your eye lens is 99% water, a bone. You see the world through the lens of water, and water sees you and knows all your secrets. So there is no hiding from water because it's reading your intention far more than it's reading just your thoughts. It reads the
Mm.
deeper levels. And so he said, well, if you look at Nikola Tesla and you look at Victor Schauberger and you look at how genius their work was, and then you look at the end of their lives and how their work became used for more nefarious reasons, and how
Mm.
it's a little bit like fire, it can burn you or it can warm you. He said if we end up, his goal was that if we can end up with a world of technology that is based around water, and water isn't doesn't work when there is not good intention. Wouldn't that be amazing? And I'm like, yes, actually it would. And okay, I'll do this thing for you. I would never do this again based off what happened, but it taught me something really helpful. And I think it helps people. I hope it helps people. It's one of the reasons I even talk about forgiveness relating to water. So my nature, I'm a very open person, as you can probably tell. And and so I'm not at that. Like lying isn't something I normally do, and especially not to order. So I have this dish, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do here? So if you know any of my work, I have thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of photos of water responding in an intelligent manner. This is not some random thing. I'm not just, you know, making stuff up. This comes from a lot, from like 16 years of work.
Mm.
And so, and I do all kinds of things. I'm not limited to it. So sometimes I'm like, I'm just going to ask water a question. Why not? So I just said to the water, can you just show me something so amazing? And I'll keep it between me and you and I won't share it. And I immediately froze it before the guilt set in because it did. And I knew I would go and tell that guy what happened. So I knew that what I just said was a lie. And I was working with spring water. I work with all kinds of waters, but I love to work with rainwater and spring water or any water that has salts and minerals in it. I don't work with distilled water. It's like an observer rather than an active participant. Anyway, so I'm outside the freezer going, oh my God, this is probably just going to get so disordered now. And like, why did I have to do this thing? And this is feeling really wrong, like, and all the stuff, having all the feelings coming up.
Mm.
And so I open the freezer and I take a photograph. And yes, there's some disorder, but there is two letters in the ice that spell one word, and that word was no. And the no was to, you know, basically, I'm not going to play your silly little game. No, I am not going to work with you in this way. It was the most clear no I've ever had. I've actually had a couple now, maybe three, and they are always perfectly aligned to the thing I'm doing. And this time it freaked me out because it was such a surprise to see that. And I felt so bad. I felt so guilty. Oh my God. And I started going into this whole thing. And what happened was that water no longer would work with me. It stopped it stopped designing. It stopped, playing with me in the way that it does. My whole work with water is relational. It's about building a relationship. I never think I'm experimenting with water or programming it. Why would I want to impart that on the water when I can see that it is actually responding as opposed to reacting, that it holds a intelligence far beyond what we could even imagine at this point. And so I just started beating myself up. I'm like, oh my God. Every day I'm trying to work with water and I'm just seeing signature patterns, which is just a pattern you see that's relative to the type of water it is. And I'm not seeing any complex crystallography like I'm used to. And I end up just thinking, oh my God, this is probably it. Water's never going to play with me again. Like I've just ruined this whole thing because of a lie. And then I started to remind myself of something that I've been talking about for many, many years on many, many a podcast. And that is that water is not in judgment.
Mm.
In fact, it's one of the spiritual aspects of water is that it is an observer. It's not judging. And I realized something that needed to happen. And that was I had to forgive myself for what I had done. And I hadn't done it to be mean to the water. I'd done it because this man had this dream and idea, and I wanted to see, yes, let me show that water does know when it's being deceived. It does understand far beyond what most people could even see because we can convince ourselves that someone's telling us the truth when we want that truth. We want to hear that truth when actually it's not true. Water just sees things as they are, not as we want them to be. And so I really genuinely forgave myself. I'm like, okay, good people do these things. I'm a good person. I'm going to forgive myself. And I did. And okay, you're okay. It's okay. And also without the prerequisite of water needing to play with me anymore. And I let that go because I'm like, okay, if the lesson is this, is that I need to learn how to forgive myself, then that's my lesson. If water isn't going to play with me anymore, I need to also be okay with that because I can't be in control. Because if there's nothing else I learned, then water is trying to help me remove my need for control. And so I need to be able to be open and neutral and curious, not controlling, experimental, and whatever else comes with that. And as soon as I started playing with water again from that genuine place, the next thing I got was this big heart. It took up practically the whole petri dish. And then water and I have been fantastic ever since. But the lesson was that truly forgiveness is a superpower. And that water is meant to be flowing, not forced
Mm,
and or stagnant. And so
mm.
forgiveness helps unblock that flow. And if I can forgive someone who literally tried to kill me, and if I can forgive myself for lying to water, then and see the biggest changes happen then. It's just that door gets to open up and we actually get to be free. It gives us a freedom that we didn't know we even could have. And I'm so grateful every single day to be able to share hope with people. And I know how hard it is for people to forgive themselves or forgive other people when there have been such awful things happen to them. Trust me, there's way more awful things that have happened to me in my life and in my childhood, and I have been able to forgive people. And that way, you free more people than just you. And you are not They don't control you. It doesn't control you anymore. And the whole thing with water is that it's not wanting to be controlled. I love that it's free. I love that I can't control it, and I love that I don't want to. And it's just this wonderful shift. So that's an extremely long story, but I hope that was helpful.
Oh my God, but Vader, I'm so appreciative that you shared that. And I think a lot of people will get so much benefit from hearing uh, what you went through. And what struck me was the speed at which you were able to go to the funeral and forgive and to say those words. That's what really, as I said, it opened a doorway to understanding your work even more deeply now and your ability to move and with life. And it was very interesting to hear that you had more trouble forgiving yourself for lying to water than you did for someone who tried to kill you.
It's
and,
actually really
and
true.
that's crazy.
But
And
it is true. People have a hard time
hard
for.
time forgiving themselves. Yeah. And the severity, I mean, you glossed over it somewhat, but the severity of the injuries were profound. And you had, everyone would have said you had every right to hold resentment uh, toward the person who'd done that to you. So, yeah, that just, how did you, I mean, it's probably very difficult to answer, and you sort of somewhat did in saying that it was something you didn't feel like you had a choice in. But is there any insight into how forgiveness arose after that incident? Was it
I think it's interesting. I mean, I like it wasn't really I just did. It wasn't
yeah,
like, oh, should I forgive this person for what he did? I think that I could see that because I'd spent a lot of time with this guy. We'd hung
mm,
out a lot. We actually became really good friends. So I knew his nature. And I also could see there's a difference between just being depressed and then clinically depressed. He
mm,
wasn't like, you know, he wasn't getting up for work. There were so many different things I won't get into that were indicated that this man had more
had
clinical
something wrong with him.
depression. And um and I don't think that that's nothing. I think that, when you spiral downward, it's hard to kind of come out of that, and he wasn't getting help. Um, and sometimes, unfortunately, these are the places where people consider taking their own lives. I mean, it's another level, taking someone else's. So he'd gone to another level there. Uh, but suicide is something that happens too frequently, and often with men more
Mm,
than women. And I feel like there's just so much that goes on inside people that we don't know. And,
mm,
it's like my mum brought me up a specific way. And this is probably more of an answer to the question. And that was that she didn't bring me up in a very religious way, but she brought me up saying to me, don't judge people and try not to judge yourself when you do something wrong too harshly.
mm,
My mother never ever had to raise her voice at me. I mean, I have three children, and I'm like, that's a miracle. Like they can drive you crazy, and I love them to pieces. But it's like, but I was the kind of person that I just loved my mum so much. She was like an angel, my mum, to me.
mm,
But I was felt so responsible for my behavior. So my mother, the only thing she needed to do, if I'd done something, anything, she said this, Beta, can I talk to you in the kitchen, please? And that was it. I'm like, what did I do? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, sorry, sorry. Like the thing, because I loved her so much, the last thing I wanted to do was upset her. And so for me, like I am far more likely to look at myself before I start blaming other people.
mm,
And with this particular person, he lost his life. This
mm,
life is an important thing.
mm,
Um, People around me couldn't forgive. One particular person I know still hasn't forgiven him, but that's his responsibility and it's not mine.
mm,
He has to work through his own stuff. My dad still has a hard time with it too. Like
mm.
it's if it was,
Understandably.
but for me, it wasn't really very difficult at all. I'm like, hey, I have my life. I'm gonna make the most of it. Like I'm here for some reason, And another little beautiful story about that was that three doctors, well, this part is what it was. Three doctors over the course of all that time. In the very first year, three doctors told me I wouldn't probably ever be able to have children because of the amount of scar tissue that happened around my reproductive organs because the seatbelt crushed me on impact. And I had also had stage 4 endometriosis, and I'd had 3 operations for that too. So they were like, listen, with everything that's gone on,
Mm,
you're probably never going to be able to have children. And I had put what they'd said on the shelf and just sort of allowed my body to make the decision for itself. I think that's a very big thing.
it's
That
huge.
when you get told by someone like a doctor that your body can't do something, it's so easy just to believe it. And then your body is the whole biology of belief, like Bruce Lipton talks about. You're just going to believe it, and then that will become a truth. If you think you can, if you think you can't, you're right.
Mm,
And so I just left it as a possibility that anything, my body would just make that decision. And then I had ended up having 3 children, one for each doctor that told me I couldn't over the course of all this time. Obviously not out of defiance, they're all like
yeah.
miracles. And in the end, like I said, sometimes we don't see the blessing until later. And so my son Rama, when he was just nearly 3, this was actually the day before the second big uh no the second big earthquake in New Zealand that we had. I lived in Christchurch at the
Mm,
time. And a new friend had come down from Auckland to visit me. And she was a nurse, so she was saying, like, how are you doing after the accident and all that stuff and blah, 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 blah. And I was talking to her and I told her, sort of what was going on, what happened. And my son Rama was going through this stage of spying on me. Like he went through a stage for about a year of doing that. He was pretty good at it. And he had all these little hiding places. And so I had never talked to him about the car accident because he wanted to, what did he want to know about that? Like he wants to know about Bob the Builder and all that kind of stuff, far more interesting. And so I just kept that to myself. So he overheard our conversation for the first time. And when he popped out of his little hiding place, I was like, oh, Rama. And he goes, but he wanted to tell me something and he wanted to tell all of us something because there was somebody else there as well. And he said, Mummy, I remember that. I remember the window wipers and the tires. And I came down out of the clouds and I went like this and I saved you. And when I knew you were okay, I climbed back up the ladder into the clouds.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much. He was so matter of fact about it. And it was just from the mouths of babes. And I'm telling you, things might seem hard right now and seem so awful, but just give it time. You'll see what the blessing is in the future. And I mean, he's 18 now, and I'm just so grateful for him remembering that moment and for me being able to share it with people.